Hey, Crimson Desert fans, this is Chris Bolt, and look at what Digital Foundry dropped on us today. Crimson Desert on PlayStation 5 Pro, the Digital Foundry deep dive. Now, this is to hopefully this will quell a lot of the concerns that, at least on PlayStation and you on a PlayStation 5 Pro, should give you an indication of how this game will perform. And I dropped a little bit of a tidbit this morning on one of my own videos when I was streaming on for another game that I like to play, Solo Leveling Arise. I was looking at some gameplay footage off of Steam of Crimson Desert, and right there at the bottom it said captured on a PS5 Pro, and it looked pretty good to me. But some people are still skeptical. But this is Digital Foundry. They're an independent source. They're highly respected across the gaming industry. So let's see what they have to go ahead and say about all of this. But before I do jump into the content, do make sure you like, share, subscribe, turn on the post notifications. All that stuff really helps me out. And without further ado, let's go ahead and get off into this.
When you attempt to explain a game like Crimson Desert to a colleague, it almost sounds like a fake game that you might have tried to pass off to your classmates back in the day. Like, I drifted my horse around the fields before stumbling into a giant circus performance, after which I made my way to the hills of the great bug wars between giant metallic insects and gun-toting soldiers before visiting the fortress of the giant robots. After which I took a stroll along the beach before stumbling into a large city where I became a wanted criminal, only to escape by jumping off the castle's wall, to then find myself lost in a rainforest during a storm at night, before eventually emerging out into the Crimson Desert itself and climbing to its highest point to see the world that I had just traversed. Oh, and there's dragons you can fly around on, and giant bosses like Shadow of the Colossus, and you can swing like Spider-Man, and the combat makes you feel like a medieval John Wick. Like, seriously, I'm not one to normally get excited about open world games, as followers of DF might know, but Crimson Desert is crazy and ambitious in a way that I quickly became enamored with. I just wanted to see what was over the next hill. It really brought back that thrill of exploration.
I liked his whole entire description, by the way. That just goes to show the level of imagination that Pearl Abyss has when it comes to just designing this game. You got a whole mishmash of so many things, and it just comes together in a nice, beautiful package. And once again, this is on the PlayStation 5 Pro. This is not PC gaming footage we are looking at right here. This is absolutely beautiful. And so far, I still haven't seen any type of stuttering. No stuttering, no frame drops or anything like that. That may come up a little later because this is Digital Foundry, and they'll find it if it happens. But so far, wow. You PlayStation 5 Pro fans, you're in for a treat.
But all this ambition does not come for free, and nearly all of the promotional footage leading up to launch has focused on the PC version, which looks obscenely good, leaving people to wonder, did they hide the console version? Is it actually any good? Well, DF friends, wonder no more. Everything you've been seeing here today thus far has been captured from the console version of the game, and today we'll be exploring that experience. For this initial video, however, there is a word of caution. We've only had access to the PlayStation 5 Pro version thus far, but fear not, the other consoles are incoming soon, and we'll tackle them in due time.
So that will be the only caveat that some people will be able to hold on to. This isn't the PlayStation 5 or the Xbox Series X. We definitely know the Xbox Series S is going to be trashed. I'm just going to put that out there. But the Xbox Series X and the PlayStation 5 versions of the game have still not been tested. The thing is I originally thought this was going to be dropped at launch, because that's what Digital Foundry said in another video that I will link to with regards to what's going on with the consoles and everything like that. But apparently Pearl Abyss gave them to go ahead and drop this a little early. This can be considered a review. There was another somebody had dropped their review early, like last night, just dropped their review. They did a 2-hour stream. A lot of the Redditors were able to get to it, and they took that one down. But overall they said that this game would probably land within between 80 and 85 on Metacritic. I tend to agree with that. That's probably what's going to happen when a lot of people get their hands on the game. But let me go ahead and stop talking. Let me go ahead and let Digital Foundry keep on observing.
For now, though, let's dive in. Crimson Desert is a rare and exciting moment for us at Digital Foundry. In a landscape where Unreal Engine has become the default, and where its strengths and weaknesses are now largely predictable, Pearl Abyss has arrived with something genuinely new to explore. Their Black Space engine delivers results that are nothing short of remarkable. Yeah, there's some jank to contend with, of course, and we'll get to that, but the overall impression it leaves is striking. From performance to crowd behavior, animation, freedom, foliage, lighting, everything, it is a stunning game. And on PS5 Pro here, you actually don't lose that much. For starters, the game's ray tracing features are fully present and accounted for on the Pro. The ray traced diffuse global illumination we highlighted in our PC preview, the per pixel solution, yeah.
I think that's the first stuttering that we've seen right there, was the way that camera was panning about. It was a little bit of a stutter. So I think they're still working on this game. So hopefully they'll get that down to a minimum. But yes, there was some stuttering right there with the panning that Digital Foundry was doing right there. But it's still impressive looking game.
It's enabled here. This gives the game a fully dynamic, ray traced driven lighting system. Sunlight pouring into a room naturally bounces across surfaces, creating dramatic, believable.
And I should also mention that I think they do have this cranked up to the quality level. So I'm pretty sure if you go down to balanced or performance, that stutter with the camera probably will not be present. But again, they're at probably at the highest level looking at this.
Scenes, and it's all done fully dynamically. The same is true of local lights, which produce equally impressive results. You have a lantern in your inventory, for instance, which you can pull out at any time, and the light from your lantern produces ultra dramatic scenes, especially at night where light is scarce. Scenes like this are particularly impressive. This battle here has lights being generated by the enemies that you're fighting, and all of it is fully real time, with shadows and lights dancing realistically across the terrain. It makes the battle feel so dynamic. The lighting has a distinctive quality that makes the world feel more convincing than most current-gen games. The bright blue skies stand out immediately, and the environment around your character shows clear atmospheric light scattering. The real-time time of day system also pays off. Days and nights last longer than you usually see in games, and nighttime is genuinely dark, closer to something like, say, Dragon's Dogma, but with stronger, more consistent ray-traced lighting. Ray tracing is enabled across all 3 modes, by the way. Yes, there are 3 modes. So the overall lighting quality remains intact and consistent regardless of how you play. The only drawback here is that the denoiser occasionally struggles in more extreme cases. It's not as speckly as Resident Evil Requiem, but it's definitely still noticeable. In particular, I noticed streaking and noise in areas of high contrast. Even so, lighting is a major pillar of the game's visual identity and works beautifully overall. I'll be curious to see how the game looks without ray tracing though, because it seems like the Xbox Series S version does not have this feature. Beyond that, I noticed some really great visual touches that I wanted to highlight. For instance, particle shadows. Smoke plumes cast real dynamic shadows that you can observe as you move around. You can see that here if we look at this smokestack and then turn the camera around, you actually see the shadows from the emanating smoke. It's very cool. And attacks from above actually do the same. It's a subtle feature, not something I've often thought about, but it really adds a surprising amount of depth when it hits.
That is exactly correct. That is a lot of depth. Just little tidbits like that are so impressive. to sit there and say, well, when you do smoke actually has a shadow. So how would that shadow react if we put the smoke off in there? And there you go right there. Absolutely just fine attention to details by Pearl Abyss. Really like that.
Ray traced reflections are also something I noticed. With so much water and other reflective surfaces, it's impressive that every mode on PS5 Pro actually includes them. The system manages to blend ray traced reflections with SSR and assign distance fields for distant geometry. This is one area where I noticed a little bit of a difference in the performance mode though. The BVH tightens up around the camera, reducing the overall reflection radius. The results still look excellent, but it relies more heavily on the fallback solutions. But honestly, even still, it looks excellent, and the water itself is kind of a standout. Now, I discussed this with Alex in our initial PC preview, but the way the wave system works is super cool. Waves break and split around rocks, for instance. They wash up on shore and recede naturally. Wet surfaces pick up a specular sheen, and characters themselves even generate ripples that interact convincingly with the environment and other ripples. When you climb into the mountains, you'll see water sort of streaming down the mountainside, right? And the way they've handled all the directionality of the water itself is extremely impressive. But
I tell you, Pearl Abyss should license this and sell it to other developers for use. Can you guys imagine Skyrim or Fallout being made in this particular engine? Or The Witcher 3? Or Cyberpunk? Or I said Witcher 3, maybe Witcher 4, or any other number of games that are out there. This is an impressive engine that they have built. And it's the first one. It's 1.0. So that means it only can get better from here once they fully understand how this engine works. Man, I am just so impressed by this engine, and the water is a good spectacle.
crucially, the water also looks great at scale. When standing on a mountain looking out across the ocean, for instance, it's still convincing and beautiful. I also love how they simulate the penetration of light through the surface of the water, like standing in deep water here with your lantern. But the water in general is just beautiful throughout this game and a real visual highlight. The way they're able to scale from nearby ripples to a full ocean is very impressive. And this idea of scale is kind of what surprised me the most. The developers have managed to deliver this combination of ridiculous near-field detail at a huge scale that you can appreciate at a distance. Just stop and look around, right? Every scene is packed with this fine-grained detail.
I am going to be taking so many damn pictures and just doing so many videos where I just pan the camera and just put that stuff online for you guys to watch, because this, oh my God, this game is so beautiful. This game is so beautiful. I normally don't glaze over graphics, but this right here, it just blows my mind about what Pearl Abyss has done with this game. And like I said, the story might be shit, but to explore this world and experience the combat and just go out there and just make discoveries, I'm all in for it.
Absurd amount of foliage variety, for instance, and all that foliage is affected by weather conditions blowing realistically in the wind. When a storm starts to wind up, the trees whip around violently around you. But beyond that, they also react directly to the player and NPC movement as well. Yet it's perhaps the distant rendering of the trees that impressed me the most. You see, this is an area where games typically struggle, yet here trees far off in the distance are actually properly lit and shadowed, while still giving the perception of detail. Shadowing distant trees has such a positive impact on the overall visual design, and it's something that most other games either skip completely or do in a very blobby, simple fashion. And this sort of insane detail can also be said of the surfaces and textures throughout the game. These guys went wild with displacement mapping. It's not a new technique, obviously, but it's everywhere. What do I mean? Well, essentially, just look at the ground here. This allows the developers to simulate depth within a texture, lending that surface increased perceived detail without leveraging more geometry. As a result,
I'm gonna just say this right here, that there is a place for gotcha games in the gaming as well as MMORPGs, games where they're live service and the game company puts out a product and with microtransactions. I wagered that Black Desert Online, because of that game's success, allowed Pearl Abyss to go in there and build an engine of this magnitude. It's all thanks to Black Desert Online that this game exists. Without that live service game, Black Desert Online, we wouldn't have a Crimson Desert. And as everybody knows, Crimson Desert originally started off as an MMO, but then they felt like the scale and the scope of the game was so great that it would figure to be more of a single player experience. There's still somebody mentioned that it reminds them of Black Desert, and I disagree with that. It may have the combat may simulate something from Black Desert, especially when you have the grand number of enemies that are coming at you when you're attacking them. But overall, Crimson Desert is its own beast. This is phenomenal. And like he was just talking about, just looking at the ground, it looks so varied. The wall right there looks so varied. It might be an illusion, but it still is something that works. And it wouldn't be here were it not for the success Pearl Abyss experienced with Black Desert Online.
Every stone, every brick, and just about any other surface in the game is just exploding with visual detail like this.
Oh, and by the way, just so I mentioned, all of the characters are all voiced. They're all voiced. There's no silence in there. Every character gets voiced in this game. So that's another big feather in the hat of Black Desert Online being so successful to allow Pearl Abyss to be able to deliver a game of this magnitude.
There are virtually no flat surfaces in Crimson Desert. I've never seen this technique executed at scale quite like this, and I do think it adds a lot to the presentation. But there is one downside. It can produce some visual bugs at times. Something I noticed especially in that first town. Stuff like this, for instance, right? The larger issue can be seen when you look at areas where the texture sort of protrudes from the geometry, like this, on edges. There's sometimes flicker and pixelation along these surfaces. You'll notice it on rock walls, trees, and various other edges, just like that. It's worth mentioning, though, that this bothered me more when I first started the game, but after you start to make progress, you just kind of forget about it. The overall majesty of the visuals kind of takes over. Either way, it's cool to see such a great technique return here. There's more to discuss in the visual side, but honestly, for now, I feel like it might be a good time to talk about the specifics around the PS5 Pro version of the game. After all, a lot of people are wondering just how it runs, and while you might have a good idea by now, there is more to discuss. So as the spec sheet released by Pearl Abyss notes, there are 3 modes on most consoles, including PS5 Pro: Optimal, which is the performance mode, Balanced, and Quality. This translates to internal resolutions of 1080p, 1440p, and 4K respectively, and our counts confirm this to be the case. Where it differs from the user experience you might have, however, is that the current build we had access to is running with the original PSSR, as opposed to what we affectionately call PSSR2. Thus, image quality wasn't great. Apparently, PSSR2 is planned for launch, but in its current state, I can't really judge image quality yet, aside to say that the usual PSSR artifacts are indeed visible, with smearing around foliage and some ray tracing noise being the most obvious. It'll be very interesting to see how this changes with the upgraded PSSR. But the real reason to use the various...
Now, before he gets into the frame rate analysis on this and everything, I will wager that a lot of that flickering that we're seeing that the Digital Foundry just pointed out, I forget his name, I think his name is John, but I'm just going to say Digital Foundry just to be polite. I'm certain that Pearl Abyss will continue to work on that after launch to go ahead and be able to get rid of that. It just seems like it was a problem that they couldn't solve, and they say, well, we need to get this product out by this date, so we'll worry about that after launch. And of course, as Digital Foundry mentioned, they're still optimizing this game. And I wager they are working day and night to try to make sure that this is as good and smooth as possible for gamers on all platforms. So I expect that some of that might be reduced, but it probably still won't be enough, that they'll have to probably come out with another patch afterwards. So I'm gonna be playing this game for quite some time. So I'm all off in there. The flickering doesn't bother me that much. I'm pretty sure it might bother some of you guys to a certain extent. But again, like Digital Foundry said, once you start playing the game and you just see the majesty of everything within this game, you're probably gonna sit there and think, I can put up with a little bit of flicker. And so yeah, I'm right now, I'm like, yeah, it was bothersome, but I'll live with it. I'll allow it, and I expect that they'll come out with a patch afterwards. But let's go ahead and let Digital Foundry look at the frame rate analysis here.
Performance modes actually stems from performance, and Crimson Desert offers some impressive flexibility here. Essentially, by default, each mode corresponds to a different frame rate target: 60 FPS for performance, 40 for balanced, and 30 for quality. The balance mode, of course, requires a 120 Hz output to function correctly. The performance mode, though, puts up a good fight. I poured a solid 20 hours or so into the game, and most of that was spent in performance mode. By and large, that 60 FPS target is maintained. I was surprised by how good it is overall. But it was also enlightening playing this way without any sort of VRR, as it did help me identify specific areas where it can and does drop. Most of the time, that involves larger crowds. Anything involving tons of NPCs or enemies can drop the frame rate. That's not to say there aren't occasional dips in quieter spots like this, but overall, most of the drops will happen when it's busy. The most significant of which occurred during the battle for Bug Hill, as I like to call it. Here, war is waging and casualties include the frame rate, which drops significantly, making it far and away the worst spot I found in the game so far. It starts out okay, sometimes hitting 60, sometimes dropping into the 50s, as you do. But once you actually reach the top of Bug Hill, the specific encampment here, we start to see some major drops. And I think this is actually made worse by kiting enemies around, because I came here before my character was ready and would die instantly if hit, so I have a ton of insects chasing me around. And as a result, we actually see the frame rate slip all the way into the 30s. I believe this section is very specifically CPU limited, as it deals with so many active enemies at once. It makes sense. You can trigger similar results in some of the game's large cities, especially when causing a ruckus like this. Once the crowd starts to panic and the guards rush the player character, the frame rate definitely takes a hit as well. Crucially, it is not the norm at all, so don't take that away from it, but it does show you that certain situations can bring the performance to its knees. In comparison, the 30 and 40 FPS modes are largely more stable overall, holding their targets reasonably well. Like here, I visited Bug Hill in quality mode, and we're rendering 4 times the number of pixels here. It's 4K mode, right? Plus the graphics quality is increased even. Yet despite dipping into the 30s in performance mode, we're actually hitting a stable 30 FPS here in that quality mode, which is pretty great. Weirdly enough, the balance mode actually manages to...
All right, I'm not a techie or anything like that. I mean, maybe he might provide an explanation for why that is, but maybe any of you guys that are watching this video can explain why the game performs so much better at the quality mode with 30 frames per second, but then just goes haywire on the performance mode with 60 frames per second. That seems backwards to me. But again, like I said, I'm not a techie, so maybe one of you guys can explain why that is.
They hit a pretty stable 40 FPS in this area too. All of this can be influenced by dynamic elements, of course. Like this run here in the 40 Hz mode, the reason it looks kind of fuzzy is that it started raining. So I'm running through this area in the rain. And yeah, we still see some dips here, but overall it's pretty good. Alas, this is a surprisingly heavy game, and I don't mean in terms of performance, I mean the way it feels to play. It seems intentional, but at 30 FPS, the camera and the character movement feel less responsive than I'd have normally liked. Thus, I do recommend the 40 or 60 FPS modes, which help a bit. The thing is, the game feels similarly heavy on PC even at higher frame rates, so I think it's a design choice. Now, if not for capturing, I think I'd have probably stuck with the 40 FPS mode since I feel like it finds a nice balance between image quality and performance, but once we factor in the new PSSR, it might actually make sense just to stick with performance the entire time. The thing is though, if you drop into the options menu, you might notice something else. There's a VSync toggle. Let me start by saying that if you're not using a VRR display, do not turn on this option. It is horrifically bad and clearly not intended for use without VRR. I mean, just look at this. The results are extremely awful. Don't use it, trust me. But it does become useful when combined with VRR. But mainly just in performance mode. You see, despite the 120Hz container, the VRR in this game does not seem to support low frame rate compensation like some other major first-party titles. So when it dips out of the VRR range, screen tearing reappears. This makes the setting unsuitable for quality and even balanced mode because tearing does appear. When coupled with performance mode, however, it's legitimately cool and allows frame rates that go above 60 FPS. It's honestly the most responsive and smooth feeling mode in the game, and as you can see, manages to keep frame rates under control. I did a full walk from one area to the other, and it gives a good idea of what you can expect. Using this mode, you won't really detect frame rate dips at all outside of perhaps places like Bug Hill. Honestly though, when it comes to overall performance, I do think the results here are pretty good. When you consider the scope of the game and the reasonably high resolution targets, more than we see with any other UE5 games, that's for sure, the results are pretty impressive. Reflecting on all the various big open world games this gen, Crimson Desert is one of the better performers overall. It's not perfect by any means, and I do have some issues with certain image quality things, but still, I think it's fair to say that the console version, at least on PS5 Pro, is very good. So, with the performance situation firmly established on PS5 Pro, we await the other consoles to see how it stacks up there. But regardless, there are a few other cool things I wanted to talk about that caught my eye while playing this game, and to do that, I want to take you on a small journey. You see, early on I made the decision to test the open world, not knowing what was in store for me nor how large the game world really was. So I set a waypoint just out in the middle of nowhere to sort of guide me in the proper direction, and I just went. It started smoothly enough. Riding across these gorgeous fields on my horse, I marveled at the realistic sky rendering, the atmospheric light scattering. It felt so realistic and impressive. I appreciated the
I just like hearing that. He just said, I just opened the map and I just point and clicked. I love that kind of stuff. I still haven't completed the story in Skyrim. It's I'm on Xbox 360. I have close to 300 hours. Never completed it. I need to go back and finish it, but I wish Bethesda allowed you to cross save, because I like I said, that's a lot of time, and it's very detrimental to me, at least, to go back and try to do all that again. I know some of you guys probably will sit there and say, yeah, I have no problem creating a new playthrough or a new character or whatnot. Not me. I in Skyrim or in the Elder Scrolls mythology, I have an entire house of red guards, House Lantrium, and I've created this character. Her name is Devesra, and she's related to my other character from Elder Scrolls from the same house. His name is Enif Lantrium, but I just can't go in there and just recreate all that. I have to finish her story. But back to just the point and click. I never pretty much worry about the main story. I just go out and then explore, and I just see where it takes me. And let's get back to this. Let's see where he ends up.
sheer density of the environment around me, the grass blades swaying in the wind, the trees, the foliage, the interactions with the horse, the way every hoof matches the terrain. Yeah, there's definitely some visible.
By the way, I just want to just nag on this point for a minute. Isn't it sad that during the Xbox 360 and the PS3 era, we got Morrowind, Skyrim, Fallout 3, and Fallout New Vegas? All 4 games within a generation, within a gaming generation. Boy, I tell you, how far has gaming, and I'm going to just say gaming in general, even the Eastern gaming too. How far has gaming fallen that you can't even release more than one game within a generation? I mean, Capcom did do Resident Evil Village and 8, or rather Resident Evil 7 Biohazard and Resident Evil Village in one generation. But it's just like, and then they did do RE2 remake and RE4, so maybe not so much Eastern gaming, but definitely Western gaming. Okay, enough of that diversion right there. Let's get back to this.
LOD popping along the way, which I don't love, but given the scale and the performance, it's understandable. Eventually, I reached this lengthy wall running across the terrain and decided to ride full speed towards this scaffolding, and was surprised at how seamlessly you could leap off your horse and grab onto the structure. Very cool stuff. Of course, it was seemingly for nothing as my horse was able to just walk right through here on the bottom when I called him. Oh well. So I continued, and my next idea was to sort of wreak havoc in a nearby field to test the game's physics and performance. That's where I discovered horse drifting, where you can essentially sharply spin the horse around in circles in a way that feels awesome. Impressively, most smaller objects in the environment can be knocked down or destroyed by simply ramming into them, making this a lot of fun. There is a small delay when destroying physics-based items, but still, it feels really great. I then rode towards a small nearby village and attempted to knock down these things as well, only to mistakenly reveal an enemy that was just hiding in the middle. Then suddenly, from off screen, a giant guard leaped into action and eliminated him immediately. Whoa. With
Oh my goodness.
an enemy that was just hiding in the middle. Then suddenly, from off screen, a giant guard leaped into action and eliminated him immediately. Whoa. With that, though, I decided to continue forward, looking for anything interesting, and it's here that I noticed the somewhat noisy ray-traced lighting visible along the foliage here, and that reminded me that we're looking at the original PSSR. We'll be very curious to see how this looks with the upgraded PSSR at launch. But moving forward, I decided it was time to play around with some guards just to sort of test the AI, right? The results, I thought, were interesting. So after angering them, I ran away and decided to climb up on the roof of this house just to see what would happen. Turns out these guards can climb as well, and they quickly tried to overwhelm me. While the shields clipping through the roof looks a bit awkward, the result of fighting them on the roof was really interesting. I was trying to kick them off, knock them down the slope, etc., and was doing okay, but eventually they overwhelmed me. So I tried to run again, and this time they killed me, causing me to respawn nearby. And it's from this respawn point that I randomly stumbled upon this circus, and honestly, this one really surprised me as well because it felt strangely lively. There was no story reason to be here, at least not yet, but wow, look at this. The frame rate, of course, was a little unstable here, but I was surprised to see that there was an actual circus performance happening inside this tent, all lit with real-time ray tracing. Very, very cool, right? But then I stumbled back outside and figured I'd mess with the AI again, so I tried to attack NPCs. This revealed that when you first swipe at NPCs, they actually just fall back and avoid your blade. But if you keep doing this, eventually the circle of pain draws around your character and everything within this circle that is, say, a guard or an enemy will suddenly come for you. What impressed me though is the way in which the crowds dispersed, not just randomly in all directions, rather, they actually made their way as a group towards the exit in a panic as the guards then entered the scene to take me out. Which recalls something cool about fighting because you see similar behavior with enemies as well. If, say, you're fighting some bandits and you kill most of them, there's a point where some remaining enemies might actually freak out and just attempt to run away from you. You can, of course, take them out with an arrow if you're a good shot, mind you. It's a neat touch that adds a tinge of realism to the encounters. I really like the AI behavior in this game. From there, though, I kept moving forward, and eventually that's where I found Bug Hill, as I mentioned earlier, and this was quite a shock when I first found it. You see, up until this point, everything had this sort of grounded medieval flavor, but suddenly we had mechanical insects, airships, balloons, orcs, all fighting on the side of the mountain, and it looked super cool. This is when I did some of my performance testing, of course, but eventually I survived Bug Hill and found this amazing orc city built upon a mountain, which looked wholly unlike anything else I'd seen in the game yet. The sheer
Did you say orcs? We normally don't uh what's the word I'm looking for? Associate. We normally don't associate orcs with technology or building. They generally are destroyers. We normally associate dwarves with this. It looks like dwarven technology, but hey, it's orcs. Another little bit of that imagination from Pearl Abyss.
level of detail, the pipes and the ornate structures really impressed. But it was time to continue, and as night fell, I noticed a city in the distance, and that city seemed to be illuminated by electric lights. Sure enough, it was. This sort of farmland was just spread out across the terrain. At first, we thought it was Nazca lines, but it's actually an electric farm of some sorts. Very strange, very different mood as well. The HDR in this scene, by the way, was very impactful. I loved both the lights with the strong highlight, as well as the beautiful night sky with its gorgeous volumetric cloud system. So I continued, climbing the mountain in the darkness with just my torch, fumbling around. Night is really dark in this game, and it makes navigation more treacherous. I ended up exploring the cliffs, engaging a few foes, before eventually finding this view, which is just awesome. Rather than diving in, though, I decided to take a left turn of sorts and make my way down to the shore to check out the water and take in the view. The water was beautiful. Of course, I was ready to capture this scene. It really feels like you're standing at the edge of the world, but of course, you're not. So I kept moving, this time walking down the beach, eventually reaching this sort of rocky terrain. That was where I decided to test the climbing system again, and yeah, it works similarly to Breath of the Wild. You have a stamina meter and can climb most surfaces. It's actually influenced by heat and cold as well, which makes it harder to climb such surfaces. What I really like about it, though, is the way the animation system successfully matches your character's hands to logical positions as you climb the surface. It feels very gratifying as a result. Eventually, I made it to the top, and waiting for me up here turned out to be a rainforest. And the mood shifted greatly because it's not just a rainforest, it actually started to rain. Your local torch lights up the droplets around you in a beautiful fashion as the area around your character is battered by the storm. Other lighting effects, like this random blue glow from something, produces dramatic results as well. What I loved about this sequence in the jungle is that the fog and rain combined with the thickness of the trees really limits your view. It really feels isolated, as if you were actually exploring a deep jungle. Along the way, I navigated rapids, appreciating that awesome water system, dealt with a few more enemies in their encampments, walked along some cliff sides, including making some leaps of faith, before eventually reaching the edge of the forest itself. And that's when the rain started to let up, which highlighted another cool detail. Rain actually leaves behind puddles that persist for hours of game world time. It's not just a binary thing where it's rainy or not. It actually comes and goes realistically, leaving its mark, something that really adds to the realism. By this point, though, I managed to climb up the side of this steep cliff and found myself staring out across the Crimson Desert itself. From the opening village to the top of this mountain here, it took me roughly 4 hours of traversal and exploration. So, yeah, I think you get it by now. The amount of variety and display here is outstanding, and what I've shown you is just a small taste, a tiny path through the game world, a simple walk from one part of the map to another that became a memorable adventure. And this is before exploring the character's abilities or allowing the story to get started. I haven't felt this need to explore since games like Red Dead Redemption 2 or perhaps Breath of the Wild. This is without a doubt one of the most impressive open world experiences I've ever had. I genuinely found myself asking the question, how the heck did they do this over and over again? It really is that cool. And all of it worked great on PlayStation 5 Pro, even in this pre-release state. Of course, it's not perfect. As noted, performance can dip at times. There are some visual bugs with the displacement mapping in RT, and in some cases actual bugs, like here in the desert where I found myself swimming above the water at one point. Plus, the loading sequence when loading a save is weirdly lengthy, with this animation and music that sort of plays out before you drop into the world, which thankfully respawning on death is very quick and there's no other loading times during actual gameplay, so it's not a huge deal. Even with all that though, this is fantastic on PS5 Pro. They actually did it. Which brings us to the end of our first contact with the game. There's still so much more to explore here. I feel like I've just gotten started. And again, this is not a game that was super high on my hype list. It just kind of came out of nowhere. And yet, what I've played here just felt unbelievable at times, even on the console. So I'll be curious, of course, how it plays on other machines. And that's something we'll report on very soon.
All right, so there you guys have it. All on PlayStation 5 Pro. This game is absolutely beautiful. I'm gonna have to go through here and determine which one I want to make as the thumbnail. So many shots of beauty in this game, and wow, it doesn't matter where you click. And I loved his tale of my travels. That was beautiful. That was a really great story. Really great story of just, hey, I'm just gonna pick a point out here and I'm just gonna go ride. And during that entire ride, he experienced something that really upped his mood and made him feel even better. Bug Hill already iconic. Yes, indeed. This game doesn't even seem real. It's too crazy good. My Pro is ready. Holy mother of lens flare. Excited to see PSSR2. Here war is waging. Casualties includes the frame rate. That was funny. This reminds me of Skyrim. When you played it for the first time, it was so good and sense of awe is incredible. Truly next gen. Absolutely beautiful. This is so crazy. Never clicked so fast. Finally a game to use my Pro's full power. We go back and come on, give him a like. It won't give him a like. There we go. Was waiting for this. Holy smokes, the PS5 Pro is impressive. What a great engine. But I can keep going through all of this. 7 days and counting, fellas. 7 days. I'm going to go and take my day off, and I am going to play this game from sun up to sundown. There's going to be some anime that's going to have to wait. It's going to have to be some other things that have to wait. But yeah, what do you guys think about all of this? Jump down in the comments. Let me know how you guys think about this game on the PlayStation 5 Pro. Has it assuaged any of your fears about how it's going to perform on console? Or do you still have to wait for Xbox Series X and PS5 analysis to finally say, okay, we get it? Whatever your thoughts, jump down in the comments. Let me know what you think, and make sure you like, share, subscribe, turn on the post notifications. All that stuff really does help me out. And remember, this is Chris Bolt signing off, and I'll catch you guys in the next video. Take it easy.